The Sirens. Odysseus returns to Circe's island. The goddess reveals his course to him and gives advice on how to avoid the dangers he will face. The Sirens, who lure sailors to their destruction. The wandering rocks, sea rocks that destroy even birds in flight. The perils of the sea monster Schylla, and nearby the whirlpool Charybdis, and the cattle of the sun god, which Tiresias has warned Odysseus not to harm. As Circe spoke, Dawn mounted her golden throne, and on the first rays Circe left me, taking her way like a great goddess up the island. I made straight for the ship, roused up the men to get aboard, and cast off at the stern. They scrambled to their places by the rowlocks, and all in line dipped oars in the gray sea. But soon an offshore breeze blew to our liking, a canvas-bellying breeze, a lusty shipmate sent by the singing nymph with sun-bright hair. So we made fast the braces, and we rested, letting the wind and steersman work the ship. The crew being now silent before me, I addressed them, sore at heart. Dear friends, more than one man or two should know those things Circe foresaw for us and shared with me, so let me tell her forecast. Then we die with our eyes open if we are going to die, or know what death we baffle if we can. Sirens weaving a haunting song over the sea we are to shun, she said, and their green shore all sweet with clover. Yet she urged that I alone should listen to their song. Therefore, you are to tie me up tight as a splint erect along the mast, lashed to the mast. And if I shout and beg to be untied, take more turns of the rope to muffle me. I rather dwelt on this part of the forecast while our good ship made time, bound outward down the wind for the strange island of Sirens. Then, all at once the wind fell, and a calm came over all the sea, as though some power lulled the swell. The crew were on their feet briskly, to furl the sail and stow it. Then, each in place, they poised the smooth oar blades and sent the white foam scudding by. I carved a massive cake of beeswax into bits and rolled them in my hands until they softened. No long task, for a burning heat came down from Helios, lord of high noon. Going forward, I carried wax along the line and laid it thick on their ears. They tied me up then, plumb amidships, back to the mast, lashed to the mast, and took themselves again to rowing. Soon as we came smartly within hailing distance, the two Sirens, noting our fast ship off their point, made ready, and they sang. This way, oh, turn your bows, Achaea's glory, as all the world allows, moor and be merry. Sweet coupled airs we sing, no lonely seafarer holds clear of entering our green mirror. Pleased by each purling note, like honey twining from her throat and my throat, who lies a-pining? Sea rovers here take joy voyaging onward, as from our song of Troy graybeard and rower boy goeth more learned. All feats on that great field in the long warfare, dark days the bright gods willed, wounds you bore there. Argus's old soldiery on Troy beach teeming, charmed out of time we see. No life on earth can be hid from our dreaming. The lovely voices in ardor appealing over the water made me crave to listen, and I tried to say, "Untie me," to the crew, jerking my brows, but they bent steady to the oars. Then Perimedes got to his feet, he and Eurylochus, and passed more line about to hold me still. So all rowed on until the Sirens dropped under the sea rim and their singing dwindled away. My faithful company rested on their oars now, peeling off the wax that I had laid thick on their ears, then set me free. Schylla and Charybdis. But scarcely had that island faded in blue air than I saw smoke and white water with sound of waves in tumult. A sound the men heard, and it terrified them. Oars flew from their hands. The blades went knocking wild alongside till the ship lost way, with no oar blades to drive her through the water. Well, I walked up and down from bow to stern, trying to put heart into them, standing over every oarsman, saying gently, "Friends, have we never been in danger before this? More fearsome is it now than when the Cyclops penned us in his cave? What power he had! Did I not keep my nerve and use my wits to find a way out for us? Now I say, by hook or crook, this peril too shall be something that we remember. Heads up, lads. We must obey the orders as I give them. Get the oar shafts in your hands and lay back hard on your benches. Hit these breaking seas. Zeus help us pull away before we founder. You at the tiller, listen and take in all that I say. The rudders are your duty. Keep her out of the combers and the smoke. Steer for that headland. Watch the drift, or we fetch up in the smother and you drown us." That was all, and it brought them round to action. But as I sent them on towards Schylla, I told them nothing, as they could do nothing. They would have dropped their oars again in panic to roll for cover under the decking. Circe's bidding against arms had slipped my mind, so I tied on my cuirass and took up 2 heavy spears, then made my way along to the foredeck, thinking to see her first from there, the monster of the gray rock, harboring torment for my friends. I strained my eyes upon the cliffside veiled in cloud, but nowhere could I catch sight of her. And all this time, in travail, sobbing, gaining on the current, we rowed into the strait. Schylla to port, and on our starboard beam, Charybdis, dire gorge of the salt sea tide. By heaven, when she vomited, all the sea was like a cauldron, seething over intense fire when the mixture suddenly heaves and rises. The shot spume soared to the landside heights and fell like rain. But when she swallowed the sea-water down, we saw the funnel of the maelstrom, heard the rock bellowing all around, and dark sand raged on the bottom far below. My men all blanched against the gloom. Our eyes were fixed upon that yawning mouth in fear of being devoured. Then Schylla made her strike, whisking 6 of my best men from the ship. I happened to glance aft at ship and oarsmen and caught sight of their arms and legs dangling high overhead. Voices came down to me in anguish, calling my name for the last time. A man surf-casting on a point of rock for bass or mackerel, whipping his long rod to drop the sinker and the bait far out, will hook a fish and rip it from the surface to dangle wriggling through the air. So these were borne aloft in spasms toward the cliff. She ate them as they shrieked there, in her den, in the dire grapple, reaching still for me. And deathly pity ran me through at that sight, far the worst I ever suffered, questing the passes of the strange sea. We rowed on. The rocks were now behind, Charybdis too, and Schylla dropped astern. The cattle of the sun god. In the small hours of the 3rd watch, when stars that shone out in the first dusk of evening had gone down to their setting, a giant wind blew from heaven, and clouds driven by Zeus shrouded land and sea in a night of storm. So, just as dawn with fingertips of rose touched the windy world, we dragged our ship to cover in a grotto, a sea cave where nymphs had chairs of rock and sanded floors. I mustered all the crew, and said, "Old shipmates, our stores are in the ship's hold, food and drink. The cattle here are not for our provision, or we pay dearly for it. Fierce the god is who cherishes these heifers and these sheep, Helios, and no man avoids his eye. To this my fighters nodded. Yes. But now we had a month of onshore gales, blowing day in, day out, south winds or south by east. As long as bread and good red wine remained to keep the men up and appease their craving, they would not touch the cattle. But in the end, when all the barley in the ship was gone, hunger drove them to scour the wild shore with angling hooks for fishes and seafowl, whatever fell into their hands. And lean days wore their bellies thin. The storms continued. So one day I withdrew to the interior to pray the gods in solitude for hope that one might show me some way of salvation. Slipping away, I struck across the island to a sheltered spot out of the driving gale. I washed my hands there and made supplication to the gods who own Olympus, all the gods. But they, for answer, only closed my eyes under slow drops of sleep. Now on the shore, Eurylochus made his insidious plea. "Comrades," he said, "you've gone through everything. Listen to what I say. All deaths are hateful to us mortal wretches, but famine is the most pitiful, the worst end that a man can come to. Will you fight it? Come, we'll cut out the noblest of these cattle for sacrifice to the gods who own the sky, and once at home in the old country of Ithaca, if ever that day comes, we'll build a costly temple and adorn it with every beauty for the Lord of Noon. But if he flares up over his heifers lost, wishing our ship destroyed, and if the gods make cause with him, why, then I say, better open your lungs to a big sea once for all than waste to skin and bones on a lonely island." Thus Eurylochus. And they murmured, "Aye," trooping away at once to round up heifers. Now that day tranquil cattle with broad brows were grazing near, and soon the men drew up around their chosen beasts in ceremony. They plucked the leaves that shone on a tall oak, having no barley meal, to strew the victims, performed the prayers and ritual, knifed the kine and flayed each carcass, cutting thigh bones free to wrap in double folds of fat. These offerings, with strips of meat, were laid upon the fire. Then, as they had no wine, they made libation with clear spring water, broiling the entrails first. And when the bones were burnt and tripes shared, they spitted the carved meat. Just then my slumber left me in a rush. My eyes opened, and I went down the seaward path. No sooner had I caught sight of our black hull than savory odors of burnt fat eddied around me. Grief took hold of me, and I cried aloud, "O Father Zeus and gods in bliss forever, you made me sleep away this day of mischief. O cruel drowsing in the evil hour! Here they sat, and a great work they contrived." Lampetia, in her long gown meanwhile, had borne swift word to the overlord of Noon. "They have killed your kine." And the Lord Helios burst into angry speech amid the immortals. "O Father Zeus and gods in bliss forever, punish Odysseus's men. So overweening now they have killed my peaceful kine, my joy at morning when I climbed the sky of stars, and evening when I bore westward from heaven. Restitution or penalty they shall pay, and pay in full, or I go down forever to light the dead men in the underworld." Then Zeus, who drives the storm cloud, made reply, "Peace, Helios. Shine on among the gods, shine over mortals in the fields of grain. Let me throw down one white-hot bolt and make splinters of their ship in the wine-dark sea." Calypso later told me of this exchange, as she declared that Hermes had told her. Well, when I reached the sea cave in the ship, I faced each man and had it out. But where could any remedy be found? There was none. The silken beeves of Helios were dead. The gods, moreover, made queer signs appear. Cowhides began to crawl, and beef, both raw and roasted, lowed like kine upon the spits. Now 6 full days my gallant crew could feast upon the prime beef they had marked for slaughter from Helios's herd, and Zeus, the son of Cronus, added one fine morning. All the gales had ceased, blown out, and with an offshore breeze we launched again, stepping the mast and sail to make for the open sea. Astern of us the island coastline faded, and no land showed anywhere, but only sea and heaven. When Zeus Cronion piled a thunderhead above the ship while gloom spread on the ocean. We held our course but briefly. Then the squall struck whining from the west, with gale force, breaking both forestays, and the mast came toppling aft along the ship's length, so the running rigging showered into the bilge. On the afterdeck, the mast had hit the steersman a slant blow, bashing the skull in, knocking him overside, as the brave soul fled the body like a diver. With crack on crack of thunder, Zeus let fly a bolt against the ship, a direct hit, so that she bucked, in reeking fumes of sulfur, and all the men were flung into the sea. They came up round the wreck, bobbing a while like petrels on the waves. No more seafaring homeward for these, no sweet day of return. The god had turned his face from them. I clambered fore and aft my hulk until a comber split her keel from ribs, and the big timber floated free. The masts, too, broke away. A backstay floated dangling from it, stout rawhide rope, and I used this for lashing mast and keel together. These I straddled, riding the frightful storm. Nor had I yet seen the worst of it, for now the west wind dropped and a southeast gale came on, one more twist of the knife, taking me north again, straight for Charybdis. All that night I drifted, and in the sunrise, sure enough, I lay off Schylla mountain and Charybdis deep. There, as the whirlpool drank the tide, a billow tossed me, and I sprang for the great fig tree, catching on like a bat under a bough. Nowhere had I to stand, no way of climbing, the root and bole being far below, and far above my head the branches and their leaves massed, overshadowing Charybdis pool. But I clung grimly, thinking my mast and keel would come back to the surface when she spouted. And how long, with what desire I waited, till at the twilight hour, when one who hears and judges pleas in the marketplace all day between contentious men goes home to supper, the long poles at last reared from the sea. Now I let go with hands and feet, plunging straight into the foam beside the timbers, pulled astride, and rowed hard with my hands to pass by Schylla. Never could I have passed her had not the Father of gods and men this time kept me from her eyes. Once through the strait, 9 days I drifted in the open sea before I made shore, buoyed up by the gods upon Ogygia Isle. The dangerous nymph Calypso lives and sings there in her beauty, and she received me, loved me. But why tell the same tale that I told last night in hall to you and to your lady? Those adventures made a long evening, and I do not hold with tiresome repetition of a story.